So, Marcel Proust, his flood of memory started with eating a Madeleine, and mine started with this tatty-ass wooden fence. Spotting this wooden fence, which is the perimeter of the Orange County Fairgrounds, is what sparked my memory and inspired me to start taking video of this whole area. I used to ride my bike here towards my house on Fairlawn Avenue. Here's the Middletown Board of Education building. My mom was on the school board as treasurer and then vice president. My fellow elementary schoolers didn't really understand what that meant. I think they meant it made her a lot more powerful, almost like she was in the mob or something. So even though materially it didn't change my life in most ways, her being on the school board did stop me from getting beat up anymore, which was a pretty sweet perk. I once sprinted across this baseball field, or actually no, I rode my bike across it after having accidentally started a fire with my friends in the woods that we weren't able to shut down, so we fled. So, though I never played on that baseball field, I did cross it rapidly once while trying to avoid trouble. This is the block I lived on from the fall of 1986 to the summer of 94. So from ages like 3.5 to 11 I lived here. This house with the trees right here, right in front of the house, that's where I lived, 15 Fairlawn Avenue. The trees are different, but the house is largely the same. That backyard is the yard I played in like with all my friends. The color of the house is actually totally the same, except for the lattice work. It used to be green. One thing that I used to do fairly regularly when I lived here was walk down to the corner store from my house with my friends. You know, we would raise up, coins basically, like maybe $1 worth of nickels and dimes, and we'd make the trek all the way down to the corner store. And it was always a really big deal. But the thing that kind of blows my mind now doing it is that it is so much closer than it was in my memory. It always seemed like such a big, long trip, like a lot of responsibility. Oh, we're going all the way down to the corner of the block. And it's just maybe 5-6 houses down. Now we're driving from where my house was down towards Middletown High School, which I never actually attended, but we'd ride our bikes down this road like a couple times a week to go and play over at the high school. There were basketball courts, there was a big soccer field, and we'd ride over and we'd play there. And also, later in elementary school, I would go there with my friend Sean Osborne to act as the ball boys for the varsity girls soccer team, which I'd say it was a pretty sweet job, for reasons I really probably don't have to get into. But yeah, here we are. This is the field. Holy crap, this was way closer than I thought it would be. Wow, they really redid this too. This is, the parking lot. Fascinating. The parking lot of the high school. We used to take advantage of, this big open space that was all paved nicely to ride our bikes and try to do bike tricks badly. But also, now, I'm operating from memory, so maybe this isn't the case. But okay, if you cut down this hill, you'd have access to a road that would take you to the local grocery store. And so that's, here we are. We would ride through here, and then we would come down the hill, and we'd have access to this back road that's over near, this is the county fairgrounds over here. And then, in hindsight, I'm looking at all these roads, and I'm like, how is like an 8 or 9-year-old, what was I riding around on my bike on all these freaking roads? Like, they're 2-lane highways, basically. no helmet, nothing like that. As a reward in elementary school, when we would, have a particular streak of good behavior in the, what was it called, the Shoot for the Stars program, where, you'd have like 20 merits or whatever, you would get a field trip to the cinema here. I remember seeing Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Also, I don't know where it is anymore in this plaza, but there's also a Carvel, home of like the best goddamn ice cream in the world, in my opinion. And to just prove that yes, we are in New York, here's a frickin' pork store. Those are a thing. One place I've never been and two places I've been. This bar, now known as the Bullpen, used to be DeStefano's. Now, Mr. DeStefano was the mayor of Middletown, and he also owned this bar. And sometimes he would bartend and do work at it, even when he was the mayor. Now, directly across the street is 37 Beatty Avenue, and more importantly, the second floor of this house, where my Aunt Mary and my cousin Michelle lived. I do sleepovers here a lot. My cousin Michelle was the person who gave me, my first music, a cassette tape of Dark Side of the Moon, and my Aunt Mary, cleaned houses for a living, and, would sometimes babysit me when my parents needed a break, and that would be, fairly regularly now that I think about it. So that's the one place I have been. And the other place I've been is this little teeny house over here, which is where my grandmother lived, until she passed away in 1988. We'd watch movies sometimes. Her favorite movie towards the end of her life was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and it might be why it's one of my favorites. I guess now's as good a time as any to tell you about my friends Ryan and Sean. They were the children of my dad's best friend, Bill. And my dad was godfather to Ryan, the older son, and the younger son, Sean, was a couple months older than me. And we were all best friends. We used to play out in the woods down these railroad tracks, which is right around the corner from their house on, actually not positive if it's Houston, like in New York City, or Houston, like everywhere else. But they live on either Houston or Houston Avenue, which is behind me. Actually, there it is. So we'd ride our bikes out here and try to find shotgun shells and shit out in the woods. But as soon as I saw this spot, I totally remembered and had to pull over the car and jump out. I, somewhere in these woods, once took a fall off a steep hill with my bike and split my knee open and had to go home over to their house on Houston/Houston, where their mother, Pam, gave me my first treatment with peroxide, which hurt like a motherfucker, and I still kind of remember that every time I use peroxide. The trouble with these long tracking shots is then you gotta walk all the way the fuck back. My friends Ryan and Sean, like I've mentioned, lived on Houston Avenue. I wasn't sure if I was gonna be able to remember the exact house, so this is kind of an experiment. I'm basically walking to where I think it is. My guess in my brain was that it was house number 17, which I'm coming right up to, and I absolutely remember that wooden front entrance. That was an entrance to an apartment that was on the second floor. I don't know if that was the landlord or if they were renting it out. But this is their house, 17 Houston Avenue. And back around back, there's a shed. Yep, there it is. It's not in the same repair anymore. Right around the corner from where my friends Ryan and Sean lived is this big building, this factory, which is called Flurchem now. I don't know if that was the name at the time. It's a flavors and fragrances factory where they produce like the esters that give things their scent. And so One thing about this place is that you would smell whatever they were producing, and so you would get these scents randomly throughout the day that covered a pretty significant swath of town. So here is the Colonial Diner, where my lifelong love affair with getting a really good hamburger began. This was a place that I would sometimes go with my dad, and he would tell this story pretty fondly as well. The first time I got a hamburger at the Colonial Diner, my eyes rolled back in my head with the enjoyment of the hamburger I got here. So, this is my old elementary school. I went here in the late 80s. This is where I'd go in. The cafeteria was down the steps from in here. It's all boarded up. Damn, this is depressing. I thought it would be less depressing. But, yeah, this is kindergarten through 6th grade. I still can't get over all the no trespassing signs and all the boarding up. I don't know what that's all about. So this door is locked. There's an entrance around the back that I remember that actually is where our playground was. There's this area that we called the pit. Going around the back now, up to Beacon Street, I now know. I don't think I ever actually knew what street this was. I just knew it was behind the elementary school. So, the thing about this area, it was a fairly poor area. Even now there's still like a lot of boarded up houses and things in disrepair, overgrown, weeds, all that stuff. But this is also a street where, like a block away from my elementary school, there were crack houses. And, it was a pretty rough neighborhood. I wasn't allowed to walk to school until I was older. So here we are at the aforementioned pit. The pit, as you can see, is a literal pit about 10 feet below street level in the back of the school. This is where we would have recess once we were past like 2nd grade. You can see the basketball hoops are all kind of in disrepair, although when we were there weren't even basketball hoops. They were generally like this one in the middle here that has no hoop or backboard. We'd use those and just shoot between the pipes, and that's how we'd play basketball. This is actually the entrance that would lead you to the band room. Once a week we'd skip recess and have band rehearsal as a group during lunch. And this area here with the covered windows, that's where the band room was. This is the staircase that you would use to get into the pit, although generally it's locked, or it was. High schoolers would frequently scale it to come down into this little secret hidden area. They'd come down here and make out and also do more stuff, because we'd find condoms like once a month down here, which is pretty disgusting, but I don't think we were actually that grossed out by it then. It was just like a ooh kind of thing. But yeah, so this is where we would play every day, the pit. This is the lower elementary playground. This is where like the kindergarten through 2nd graders would play. That's the entrance to the school. The front of the school is down through there, and this is where you'd enter from the back, like if your parents dropped you off on the back street, which I now know is Beacon. So we'd play in here, and actually I have a little anecdote about this staircase here. This landing is the place where I first got beat up in elementary school. It was by a kid named Obed Batista, who was a really rough character who came from a really rough family. The kind where there's one kid in every grade and they're the bully of that grade. And so by 4th or 5th grade, he was able to actually legit put people in the hospital, but in 2nd grade when he fought me, he wasn't quite there yet. He punched me in the face on this stairwell landing. Not that hard. The thing that was upsetting about it especially, though, was that while he was punching me, he'd make these video game noises, like boop, 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 and it made it so much more humiliating. So I guess things have gotten somewhat nicer in this area, because like there's this really nice house directly across the street from this abandoned elementary school. Solar panels on the roof, well curated, little puppy coming out and barking at me. So I better get the fuck out of here. I'm driving back now to my old house on Fairlawn, back from the elementary school, which, just like I guess every other thing in my preteen life, was less than a mile from my house. Those two places were less than a mile apart. And so I think that's maybe the big takeaway for me, was just how close together everything was. This was, I imagine this area is so expansive, I guess. It looms so large in my memory. And it's really just a couple of square miles. Kind of all the living I did and all the adventures I had were so close together geographically that I've been finding it so surprising. That's been the big takeaway, I think. Wish I had something deeper than that, but sorry. Once I was in later elementary school, this would be the street, this would be the sidewalk, actually, that I would walk home on. I don't think we had Mario's Island Cuisine at that time. We weren't graced with their presence, but generally otherwise, this all looks pretty familiar. Straight ahead, we're going to see the convenience store that I visited earlier. Right here, the corner store. And then here we are, Fairlawn Avenue, my old street. So we're back, coming up to number 15. Here we are, back home.